Fab. Hello, everyone. Come on in. As you're coming in, we would love for you to stay on mute, come off camera, and please, please, please let us know where you are tuning in from. We would love to know where in the world you're at, where you're coming in. We have some Londons, we have Seattle. Oh, I'm originally from Seattle. How's the rain today? Santa Cruz, the antithesis of Seattle right now, probably. Oh, Mexico City. I always love kind of seeing how global everyone is and who's coming in from where. And then as you're coming in as well, I always like to ask very interesting questions, but one of them is, what beverage are you enjoying today? What are you drinking? Are you having a coffee, glass of wine, maybe? A Guinness if you're someone on our team? Give it Evian. Oh, yes, I just have tap water. Fab. We're going to start in a few minutes, guys. We're just going to be letting everyone in. We have Stockholm. Yes. Is it still snowing and cold? Fab, fab, fab. And then as you're coming in as well, we would love to know where in your AI journey you're in. Are you already a founder, or are you building, currently building? Are you an experienced founder in AI? Are you just interested in AI? What is your thing? Yeah, an AI investor. So pop in. It's always 9 o'clock. I love it. Girl after my own heart with that. And then you're also welcome to pop in your LinkedIn links and everything. We'd love for you guys to connect with one another. This is just as much, for you guys to connect with each other as it is for you guys to also listen and hear from our experts. So please feel free to pop your LinkedIn's in the chat. Would love to know, what you guys are doing, what you're building, and we'll pop in mine as well. I'm just going to start and do a little intro. Hello, everyone. Thank you guys so much for coming. This is the second in our little series. This is in partnership with Adventure Forward, which Ohad is here from, and he is a Hubble expert. So I'm Sasha. I'm the head of community here at Hubble, and we're just really, really excited to be doing these fireside chats to really, bring to you incredible experts to kind of get you from that zero to one, zero to idea, idea to one, even zero to idea, if that is where you're at right now, and really help you get unstuck and get further faster is kind of our thing. Our motto at Hubble is one conversation can change everything. And that's really, really, really what we want this experience to be. So say we're doing to zero to one in applied AI. That is a mouthful, but that is what we're doing. And I'm going to pass the baton over to our experts and to our people here who are going to be, having a discussion on this. So I am going to start with Hussein from Eventship to just introduce himself, and then we'll go in a little circle.
Yeah. Thanks, Sasha. So my name is Hussein. I'm the founder of Eventship. We are building infrastructure for in-person communities and professional networking. We power things like San Diego Startup Week, San Diego Design Week, One Club Awards, and all sorts of founder meetups and chats and conversations and things like that. And so before Eventship, I was the founder of MoneyMinx, which is a company I sold to Arta Finance. And then before that, I was on the corporate side, where I was the CTO of eCapital. And I spent a good 10, 15 years in fintech. And we did a lot of AI, but it was old school AI. It was like in the time of machine learning to prevent fraud and things like that. But I've done 0 to 1, I've done 1 to 100. So I'm super excited for today.
Amazing. We'll move on to Raman.
Amazing. Thanks, Sasha. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming along. My name is Raman. I'm an AI product operator based between London and New York. I've spent the last 5 years building and scaling enterprise AI systems in highly regulated environments. So I've worked across PwC, Google, and across Fortune 100 companies. So a lot of my work has been around building domain-specific LLMs to running one of the largest Gen AI enablement programs in the UK for over 100,000 people. Today, I'm working with C-suite execs across FTSE 100s and early stage founders on deploying AI systems and driving enterprise adoption.
He's a killer, everyone. Brad, I'm going to go to you.
Yeah, great to be here, everybody. So I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've been in the startup space for most of my career. My first company, we exited to Google, and now I'm on my second 0 to 1 adventure with EyePop.ai. We're a computer vision platform, and really excited to participate in the conversation.
Amazing. Thank you. And then now to Ohad.
Yeah, well, nice to meet everyone, and thank you, Sasha, for hosting this. My name is Ohad, tech entrepreneur and founder turned investor. Worked for Google for quite some time and have been in AI for about 10, 15 years. I started a company, co-founded a company called Kahuna in the first party data or data privacy space in 2020 and sold it as part of a buyout in 2023 and then shifted over to the investment world. And so today I'm a GP in venture Forward Capital, and we invest in serial entrepreneurs that are focused on applied AI. So super excited about this conversation, of course, being a Hubble expert and helping a lot of our founders here. Also just an avid snowboarder for my free time.
Any other snowboarders? Any other snow sports? No snow sports for me. I like the water. Okay, we are going to begin with I'm going to pass the baton back over to Ohad and just kind of get a better understanding for people when you say 0 to 1 and apply to AI, what actually changes between the idea and the first real product deployment?
Right. So it's a great question. And Sasha, I'll start actually with two macro trends before I deep dive into the specifics of this question of what I'm seeing now from my angle as an investor. There's two big trends that are happening in the market. One, the deployment of AI overall is a big transformation of trust. There's a lot of questions about, is this producing the results that I want? Am I trusting this? Is it accurate enough? Is there hallucinations? We all know about these terms. And so that's something that needs to be taken into consideration when we talk about that 0 to 1. Trend number two is because of the bars of building have lowered, have gone down, we're seeing what I called, it's just rapid overcrowding of some spaces. So there's a lot of a proliferation of solutions, which means that there's a shifted weight towards go-to-market, understanding how quickly to work with customers. And so that's very, very important. Now, from my experience as a founder, again, I founded a company, it was maybe pre-Chat GPT days, but I think the lessons sort of hold is main thing that is the change is understanding where your vision is, but then kind of separating that from what am I building right now? What's the easiest and clear steps to get to work with customers right away? I think the access to the market and to customers is one of the most important things to start validating your idea. And one of my learnings is we had a very clear vision, investors were aligned, customers were aligned, but that vision took quite some time to build. The better way to do it is saying, okay, here's your vision. What is truly a 0 to 1 production, an MVP, if you will, that focuses on the right workflows and gets quickly the customer to give you the right sort of feedback, whether it's, the metrics that come out of it or the customer feedback or so forth. So that's kind of as an entry point there.
Nice. And then kind of Hussein and to Brad as founders in both of your guys' journeys, from the idea to like that first kind of product, what did that look like? And what are some of the mistakes that you think that you made that either cost you an investment or actually, derailed the entire product? I'm gonna start with Hussein and then go to Brad.
Yeah. I'll focus a little bit on the technical side, and I would say the big difference with AI now is usually when you build a product, you start with the happy path, with the green path, right? Like, does the feature work? And then you start working on the yellow paths and the red paths and all the things on the side that could go wrong. With AI, I feel like we're almost entering a phase where that's completely reversed. And it's very easy to do the happy path, right? You send the prompt, you get a response, things happen, you're like, cool, let's ship this thing. But the reality is what's happening is you have to spend a lot more time on the yellow paths and the red paths because the LLM sometimes work, sometimes it doesn't, and it's not always repeatable, right? So I know all the LLMs are working on ways to give you more consistent results, but what ends up happening is that inconsistency can break your product. And then consumers or users, they're also not very predictable, right? And so I feel like we spend, and these were some of the lessons that I've learned is you got to spend a lot more time on those yellow paths, red paths, and things like that. And I just noticed actually there is a co-founder of Clear AI, Ricardo, on the line, and they're actually building a whole startup just to deal with this kind of problem, right? And so I feel like we're starting to see a shift on how you approach product development.
Amazing. Could you go deeper into, in your journey was a yellow or a red path?
Yeah, so one example, with Eventship, one of the things we do is we introduce people, right? You're going to an event and we say, hey, Sasha, you should meet Kevin for these reasons. That little introduction, in the beginning, we just had a prompt. We were like, cool, write an introduction and see what happens. But then what ends up happening is it would start talking about potential dating things or potential, like, you might like each other. You both have like it kind of went that way because we called
Bonus.
it a match. Yeah. And so people would send me notes all the time going, hey, I'm married, right? I'm like, oh man, this AI. And so we had to really hone in on it's professional, it's introductions. It's not a match in a sense of like match.com. So that's just, a fun example that comes up.
That's so funny. I think, how have you seen, kind of last question for you, is like, how have you seen the need for AI guardrails to really play a role? And how are you thinking about it now?
Yeah. Yeah, so guardrails are interesting because in my previous role in finance, it was extremely critical, right? Because we were giving almost advice to people on what to do with your shares, buy, sell, invest, don't invest, what you should do, things like that. And so if you don't have proper guardrails and proper ways to kind of monitor and make sure you have fallbacks and things like that, it can go completely haywire, right? And so the need for really thinking through these as part of your product development are critical. I would say, in the old days, there was SDLC, right, where you wrote the documentation and then you code it and then you deploy it and then you do testing and then you do more testing. Like now you have to think through these guardrails, these fallbacks, these monitoring mechanisms, like all of these things to make sure things are going well. And depending on where you are and what kind of product you're building, it's more critical, right? So with the matchmaking, it's not a big deal, right? Like people would laugh about it, send me an email and go, hey, look at your AI is hallucinating, right? And it looks bad, but it's funny, right? If you're dealing with finance or healthcare or anything like that, then you got to be very, very careful.
That's really interesting. I think we will definitely be circling back on guardrails, and especially when we come to Raman and going into more of that corporate side and enterprise scaling. So we will be coming back into that. But Brad, I kind of want to go into you as well in that 0 to 1 journey. And we'll start there and then have more questions.
Yeah. So I have, when we were starting this company, I have the benefit of having two really experienced co-founders. I mean, these guys are rock stars and really good at what they do. So we really started with more of a craftsman style approach where we went out and we talked to as many customers. We really wanted to make sure we understood the problem statement. We wanted to make sure that we're using the right jargon within our field. And so, we really did the, measure twice and cut once type approach. That's not the right answer anymore because there is no foundation to rest on. Your underlying technology is evolving so fast now that you can't. By the time you've measured twice, the world's already rotated and people are onto something else. We have seen that our customers when we first started this in 2023, people didn't know what half the people we spoke to, they didn't know what an LLM was. They didn't never heard of Hugging Face. Like these are words that are household words now. Our customers didn't understand. So we went through all this exercise of trying to explain things differently, And so you have to evolve on all fronts. Your foundation of what you're building as a product has to be very dynamic. It has to be able to move with the changes of the industry. What you're actually serving to your customer and their problem is also consistently moving. And so what you have to do is you have to be dynamic. And the only way to do that is you have to move fast. I spoke to a VC one time and he told me, this was, with any VC conversation, you usually have the, what's your moat? What is your, how are you going to be unique? And so we went through that conversation, and one of the things that he told me was, in the AI world, the only moat is speed of execution. And I think he's absolutely right. We've definitely found that to be the case. So we made some major changes to how we operate within the company. I mean, we now emphasize speed over everything else. We'd rather build a lighter product that is flexible than the big monolithic product that has all the features. And so, yeah, I think it's exciting, but it can be overwhelming. But you have to have that mentality that you are going to be dynamic on all fronts.
And in your experience, where did you underestimate that 0 to 1 kind of when you, especially in the early days versus even now as you're kind of building that next evolution and that next level? Was it like model performance, yeah, data quality, customer behavior? Like where were those kind of, as Hussein said, yellow and red lanes?
Yes. So I would say, it'd be interesting if you went and got a time machine and went back and asked, is this space moving fast and those types of things. I would have said, oh yeah, the world's never moved faster. It still moved faster than what we would have thought, right? In our space in computer vision, the rise of things like VLMs. I mean, a year ago, nobody has heard of a VLM. Now, if you aren't leaning into VLMs, you're old school. You're getting left behind. So it's just it's one of those things that, yeah, we knew that it was a fast moving space. It's one of the things that attracted us to it. It's just it was still faster, and I still find myself with this temptation to think that, okay, well, now it's gonna slow down now, right? We're gonna have this foundation on VLMs that we're gonna get to build on for a while. Maybe, but that you can't have that be your plan. You need to anticipate what's coming next. And so it's yeah, it is a little bit difficult because there's also a lot of hype out there, right? And so we still encounter customers that are on the full spectrum, from they think that, AI is 100% magic and can do anything you want it to people that are still pretty skeptical about what's actually possible, and everything in between. So yeah, but I would say, we underestimated how fast the space would move, and that's why our first versions of the product were much heavier lifts for implementation. And we also underestimated how fast our customer base would become well versed in everything AI. The second one is actually a pleasant surprise. It makes the job a lot easier.
Sasha.
I think Sasha may have dropped off, but I would really love to add to Brad what you said around customers. You're now seeing customers being more equipped on AI and wanting to like use different tools and products. And what I'm seeing more from the enterprise side is really different. So just for context, like I work with really large enterprises who are in the Fortune 100 to 500 companies. And essentially there's an excitement of wanting to use AI and wanting to adopt it, but people don't know where to begin. And I think a lot of that hype and noise that we're seeing in the market at the moment are coming from startups and VCs who are raising like crazy, and building and shipping as soon as possible. And I think enterprises feel like they're missing out. Like there's a bit of FOMO in the room. So there's this balance that we're trying to get on. How do we take people on this emotional journey of either excitement, fear, this like, fear of like losing jobs, but also AI might take over my job, this whole kind of fear mongering that's going on. But equally, how do we hold people's hands and take them on that journey? So kind of the journey that we've been on with our clients is really going back down to the basics, which is so funny given what we're talking about on this call around like computer vision models, and Hussein, what you're building, and Ohad, you're also a serial entrepreneur. In the enterprise world, we're still going, what is AI? What's an agent? What's an LLM? But wait, our customers or our economic buyers are using those tools, but we don't understand it. So it's been a really interesting journey. And I think it really just goes back down to being human. Like, let's manage those emotions. Let's tackle that excitement and fear. Let's try and like educate, upskill, teach the basics of AI. And then also, what are all those cool tools that are out there at the moment that we can actually embed in our organization and show our clients that will be useful to their workflows? I think that's a piece that's really important. And I definitely would say this to any founders that are on the call. Really target who your economic buyer is and who your end user is, and understand how your tool can be integrated into an enterprise workflow. That's if you're looking at enterprises. So just really getting a feel of like what does that workflow look like and how does my tool make that better, I think is really important. And then attaching that to key metrics that will create a return on investment for large companies. And then the second piece, which I also see where things go wrong, is around integration. So if your tool can't integrate into a core enterprise system, so it can't be plugged into a CRM, a document system, a HR platform, like you name it, it will just become a tool that will not be used. So that's why this year there's a lot of conversation around how can we drive revenue? How can we drive enterprise AI adoption? We've got all these exciting tools that are coming out, but I don't know if it's too harsh for me to say, but I feel like 80% of the things that I'm seeing in the market in terms of startups and products, I don't know if we're actually going to get the benefit of it. So if there were three things I really wanted, like two things I'd want people to take away is really just trying to understand what value looks like for your economic buyer and your end user. And then second, how am I integrating this into their systems? And that's if it's applicable to you, if you are building and looking at into enterprises.
Yeah, I'd like to just kind of add on to that. The integration piece is so important, and so I'm glad you raised that because it's real easy to get to a place in a product where you can do a pretty compelling demo, but that's not a useful product because you haven't crossed the barrier to that integration piece, and then maybe you also need to consider the real world realities. And your comments on the difference between building a product for enterprise versus others is super important. I would say that if you're in the startup company category, you just need to pick a lane. You're not going to build a product that is well suited for the big enterprises and everybody else. So go for where your strengths are on that one.
Who here in the chat or in the group is in that like demo stage right now? Would love to know, because that's always like the scariest place to be, is being in that demo. Yeah. Raman, do you want to go a little bit deeper of when you are trying to get into these enterprise deals, what that actually looks like to nail a demo?
Oh, great question and really tricky. There's a lot of moving parts here. So I think what's really important are different things. So I'm going to first just explain the process. Okay. So one thing is finding an internal champion within that company that you're really excited about that also has real political capital. So the way these big corporates work is ideally you want to find the advocates of people that are going to champion you, that are going to talk about your company, your tool at a really large enterprise and basically put money to it. So this doesn't have to be someone who likes your product. I mean, great if they do, that's a bonus. But it needs to be somebody senior enough that can fight for a budget, navigate internal politics, and then get the kind of drum rolling on legal and procurement, which is the thing that you need in order to kind of secure a contract, a pilot, and come work with a large enterprise. So the way that I would go about it is two ways. I think one, you can do the bottom up approach where it's like find your early adopters, people that love your tool already. Perhaps it could be people in the organization and they can use it already, and perhaps you can use them as part of your pilot and you can get some user feedback. The second approach, which I think is better, is going out really senior. So let's say you're running a fintech startup and you really want to speak to somebody that's a CFO at a PwC or a Big Four. The best bet is to go senior up. So that would be the first part. Now, when you go have your conversation with this internal champion in this very large corporate, you need to be able to speak in business sense and not just technical. So in those conversations, there will be somebody that is like head of tech or head of AI that may or may not be involved in that conversation to kind of just like assess what you've built and to understand the technical parts to it. But you'll also have your champion who is going to be somebody that's business minded. And essentially, you need to be able to explain the measurable business impact that your tool is going to bring to that organization. So it's not just spoke to some of your users and they liked it, or you know what, I think it's going to save your company some time. It needs to be quantified by key metrics. So what are the productivity gains? How are you actually reducing effort? On terms of headcount, what does the revenue impact look like? Which I mentioned earlier, this year is the year of revenue. And it's really actually just putting this all on a slide and really looking at it from a business angle. And then I think the third piece, which is something you should think about very early on, especially when you're piloting, and this should already be kind of nailed before you even come and have this conversation with your buyer, is around security and compliance. So this needs to be handled upfront. Otherwise, there's no way that your pilot will succeed. And this goes back to the point that Brad and I were saying around integration. Because once you get your security and compliance underway, then you'll be able to figure out your legal. If these things are not sorted out by the time you're piloting or finished your pilot, your deal dies in review. And the things that they're going to be looking at is your data. They're going to be looking at your clauses. They're going to be looking at how you trained up your model. And a lot of these capabilities are really important when you're working in enterprises. And I can definitely speak from coming from a highly regulated environment, which Hussein mentioned earlier, that model accuracy is so important. Like, let's say you're a creative and you want to, do some image generations. You might get away with your model being at 70 to 80%. But the minute you walk into like a legal firm, a financial firm, that accuracy needs to be incredibly high in the 90s, because you're essentially dealing with highly sensitive information. And you also want to ensure that your model is outputting the correct information. Otherwise, there'll be lots of issues there, which I can go into at a later point.
For Brad, oh yeah, Ohad, go for it.
Just adding a comment to all of this, and then a controversial perspective to make it fun and interesting here. But one of the things that I'm seeing founders kind of deal with is the matter of scoping. When you build a solution, especially when you focus on AI, you really have to kind of define, what am I focused on, what specific workflows, and then what's the breadth or depth of that, because there's data quality, there's different issues that come with how big or small you're kind of building solutions. What I advise against usually is, if you have a very clear vision about what you want to ramp with AI, don't build small features. For example, here's a case that I've looked before in a company that says we want to revolutionize the entire AI solutions that would power hospitals. Okay, and they started by just building a calendaring tool. Well, that's maybe small features that will take time to lead to where you want to go. So you have to really balance and find the scope. Now, the controversial approach. I just spoke with one of our portfolio founders. His name is Raj Gopi, and he's the CEO and founder of Zive AI. And Zive is a platform for fund managers and fund admins. They're really sort of the system of record and action. And it's really fascinating what they've built. And he said something that was very different from me. He said, actually, what I learned from my first endeavor and what I'm applying now is I traded off speed for building a far complex AI for workflow. He went into the nuts and bolts of fund admin and management, which would require audits and different governance that he knew would take time to build. And so he said, like, I knew that I need to build fast. Speed is the number one. Like Brad said, I actually agree with that a lot. I made that trade-off to focus on workflows that are far more complex. And it's a risk because, again, you have to find how long do you want to build before you get that loop of metrics and feedback to take the company forward. So it's just another consideration to add here.
I wanted to connect the Brad and Raman one more time. Is Brad, when you were selling to Google, what was that process of like, the governance, the compliance, of really showcasing exactly what Raman just said?
So very different situation back then. So one, this was a hardware company. This was also 2014, and so this was AI. I mean, stuff existed, but it wasn't anything like it is now. So so in that situation, we had to be aware of where the laws were. I mean, we were a technology that could be under severe export control, so ITAR, and I had to get to the place where I could speak about export restrictions better than people I knew at Google or others. So And I don't have a legal background, so you had to work really hard at that. But yeah, it's I don't think the standard has changed in terms of, you need to be you need to make sure your company is aware of what these what the regulatory environment is. What I think has happened though is you have a higher percentage of companies that are being touched by it, because a lot of software only companies, a lot of SaaS companies, they didn't really have to worry about these types of regulations. Everyone that's doing something in AI has to have an eye on being compliant, and your customers will tell you really quickly if you're missing the ball on that one.
Very cool. Anyone have any last things to say on this before we switch gears tiny bit?
I have one quote from Demis that I want to share. So the CEO of DeepMind, and it goes back to what you're saying, Ohad. He believes that this whole like build quickly, fail quickly doesn't apply anymore in an AI world. If we want to optimize for safety and like ethics and responsible AI, then the example that you shared, Ohad, I know you talk about more about a complex workflow, then that really applies. And I would really love to get everyone's view on this because there is a real challenge between how do we ensure that we're building carefully, not cautiously, but safely and ethically, but also how do we ensure that we're like ahead of the AI race war and like one of our competitors aren't going to take us over. And I'd love to know what Hussein, Brad, Ohad, what you think the balance is.
That's an interesting one. I think there's a little bit of case by case on this. So meaning that I don't know if there's one rule that would apply to every company. I think you have to look at where you're at. And it is something that it touches us, right? Like we have to think about this because we have customers that are using us for computer vision functionality. What are we doing with their data? How are we storing it? And so we drew a line early on that we are not going to store data. We're not going to use customer data. So the data ownership stays on the customer side. That means there's things that we're not doing, things that could be really valuable. And so that was a conscious decision, but it's a conscious decision made by what is in the best interest of who we've circled as our target customer. So we're taking more of the call it the, be a good custodian of your customer's interests. And so that also means that I've had to read a lot more legal type documents and write-ups and talk to lawyers more than I would prefer, because it's pretty dry. But you gotta do it, and it is also something that this is another area where it is also evolving really quickly. What the standards are, what the rules are that you're supposed to comply with are changing all the time. And even really big companies are not keeping up with some of these regulatory environments changes. There's a regulation that was released or came into law in California in January that if you are creating Gen AI images and you are not labeling them properly as an image or AI generated content, then the fines can get comically large because you get fined for every image, and then it's every day that image is still available to the public. It ends up being like, if you calculate what somebody like a Gamma would produce, it ends up being more, many times more than the company would ever be worth. Now, that law is going to have to change because that you can't have the punishment be that big of a deal. But I talked to several companies in the space, and their CTOs were completely unaware of this regulation. So it's going to be interesting to see, because I think there's the other side of it is how are these laws enforced, and and what we're seeing so far is some are being enforced and some are just being ignored, and that makes navigation difficult.
I think we're pretty good covered on the enterprise side, so I can give a little bit of perspective on the consumer front, not necessarily from the regulatory expectations, but the consumer expectation. Because what I'm starting to see is, I remember back in the day, everybody used to talk about Amazon changed the game. Like if you don't have one-click checkout, if you don't have easy shipping, if you don't have like ease of use, like Amazon was the gold standard. And then eventually it became like the Stripe and Linear of simplicity is better UI and like those kinds of things. And I feel like now consumer expectation is really about intelligence built into your product. And so it's changed the game of how you even approach building consumer products. to the point where even for me personally with Eventship, we're still new. We've only been around for 7, 8 months, and we're going through a complete rebuild right now because that's what consumers are expecting, right? Like this idea of you tell an LLM something and it gives you a response. That was great like 2 years ago, but now it doesn't matter. Like now it's just they're expecting it to know these things. They're expecting every single product that they're using to be smart enough. And if it's not, they get really annoyed. Like, what do you mean you don't know that I like this kind of event over that kind of event? You should know this stuff. And so I would say if you're building product right now, the market is very, very different. And like everybody talks about on the enterprise side, but also on the consumer side too.
What are some of the ways that you've really been building those relationships and kind of really telling, consumers, I guess, like keeping them updated with everything that you are building?
So I'll give you a simple example, right? Is the way every events community platform works is you sign up depending on your location once a week, sometimes every other week, you get an email that's like, here's the events in San Diego, right? And that's worked great until recently, because now it's not about San Diego. Like you should know that, yes, I'm in San Diego. Actually, you're a great example, right? Because you're usually in London, but right now you're in Paris. So the tool should know that now you're in Paris. And so you don't want to see events in London. You want to see events in Paris, right? And like things like that, where it's become expectation. Because if you got an email that said, here's all the events in London, you're going to be like, well, okay, Eventship, thank you, but I'm not in London right now, right? And so that expectation is becoming more and more real. We're still early in the journey, obviously, but I think everybody needs to really think through that, which is why, like I said, like I'm rebuilding the whole thing from the ground up right now.
So I would say, Sasha, just kind of to give a huge kind of tap in the back to Hussein here. I've been a power user of Eventship for the last maybe a year and a half or 2 years. And I would say that I've actually seen the journey of personalization as it comes. And I know it's the first steps, as Hussein is saying it, but you're really seeing that it's starting to tailor to your preferences, to people that you'd like to meet, types of events that you want. And there's so much more to do here, right? So it's really, really valuable. And Hussein's really on that path. I just wanted to kind of plug that in.
I love that. And kind of switching into that, where buyers are a lot more skeptical of AI usage, AI claims, if you will, now more than like 12, 18 months ago. So what are the proofs that customers in particular are demanding? And then Raman, to you on like more the enterprise side. I'm gonna go to Hussein for this one. We're back to you.
Sorry, I thought you were going.
No, you're good.
So,
Back to you.
You know who's doing a really good job at this? Although I guess they're half consumer, half enterprise, is Intercom, right? So Intercom has an AI bot that can help you with your tier one customer support. And so what they say and what they charge you for is per resolved case, right? And so if somebody contacts your AI bot and asks a question and it resolves it, it actually asks, is this resolved or do you have more questions? And then once it's resolved, that's when that case becomes a billable item on your Intercom bill. And so what's happening here is it's not just saying, oh, we have an AI bot, which is what every other support system is saying, is we have an AI bot that can answer questions. They're saying we have an AI bot that can answer questions, resolve the case, get confirmation from the user that the case is resolved, and then we're going to bill you for it, right? So it's this expectation of you're saying it can do something, but it's actually also doing it, right? And so on the consumer side, that's probably the best example right now.
Oh, how about you? What have you been seeing in the companies that are coming to you for investment?
Yeah, so one aspect is exactly like Hussein's saying, is maybe the pricing structure and the business model that is much more focused on results and outcomes versus, the traditional SaaS was always based on seat, right? But really in this world, it doesn't make sense to charge based on seat. The expectation is to see these results, right? And it's important to design your product in a way, I think Raman discussed this before, is be very clear on how you show that value. There's products out there that are talking about general automation and time savings and efficiencies. These are all big words. How does that translate to something that is very measurable that you can show with a short usage of the product? And again, not in 2, 3, 4 years, but if someone uses your product, how can you quickly get to that sort of time to results? I think that's very, very important. Now, there's a second aspect here. Again, it goes back to trust and governance. You should be expecting the question of, how do I know that it's not fill in the blank, or that we can audit this? I'll go back to this example that I gave with Zive. I asked this question. I expected them to say, that's where the conversation would be stuck. He actually showed me there is a separate QA system that has a human in the loop that actually looks at the AI. At least short term, that's very important, because in the financial world, you really have to be very, very accurate there. There's no room for creativity. As you know, it's very fact based, and so you need to have some system that does the auditing and can sort of have the monitoring and flag things that may be inaccurate. And so that was a very big convincing point for the buyer that system exists, right? It really relieves that type of a problem.
And Raman, for you, what about for enterprise clients?
Yeah, I think Ohad explained it really well. Like, genuinely, yeah, nail on the head. I think it all goes back down to what is value to your economic buyer. I think how we see it, in also just in layman's terms, like if you're trying to figure out your pricing, just think about what you're replacing or what value you're creating for your buyer. So if I take an advisory firm and you're saying you've built an AI tool that's going to overtake management consulting, a management like a consultant engagement could be, I don't know, £3 million. So you should price against that value. So maybe you're positioning at 500K or £1 million. I'm speaking in pounds because I'm in England. But if you're replacing headcount, then price can be against the cost of those roles. Economic like enterprises are asking for these costs up front. Like, there's no more like, let me see your pitch deck, let me see your demo, and we're sold. We are still very impressed by flashy demos, but I think that unit economics plays a really big part. This is something that we want to see before we even take the meeting. We want to understand, what does your accuracy metrics look like? How are you explaining it? What is your security architecture, et cetera, in a lot more granular detail. So I think, going back to what Ohad said, a lot of it is around the value and the cost to it. And then the second piece is around, okay, what have you actually done? And do you have proof and case studies of how you've done it before? And I think case studies is a great one if you want to get into enterprise. If you can say that you've already done it before somewhere else, and that gives us more conviction and trust. The other interesting one is, so I'm a big fan of Flora. They are a generative AI creative suite startup based in Brooklyn. They just raised Series A, I think a few weeks ago, with Redpoint Ventures. And their pricing model has always been seat based, even though they're so early on. And only now, I think in the past few months, they've switched it to just being a usage slash outcome based pricing. So you're based on essentially what you generate, which I think makes more sense. There's no point having more costs for seats when you don't even know if people are creating the most value of it. Also, I'd say enterprises are quite hesitant to pay per seat. So that's just something else that you might want to think about as well.
I love how we talk about pricing, because that was like my next question. So that's like the perfect segue of AI pricing is so hard. I think, as Jake just like dropped in the chat as well, like it is one of the hardest things to think about right now. So for Brad and Hussein, how were you guys thinking about it when you guys first started? And then how has that evolved now with like all of the new AI tools, all the integrations, all of that stuff?
So pricing is really hard, and we've gone through a number of experiments. I'm not going to claim that we have it figured out. I think this is going to be something that continues to evolve, and I don't know that it's going to. I don't know if we're going to land on something that just doesn't change forever. I think we're just going to have to continue to evolve as the industry evolves. When you can do outcomes-based pricing, that is where there's the least amount of friction between your product and your customer. Now, that doesn't just there can be practical reasons why that just doesn't make sense. In our case, we're offer computer vision solutions, and so maybe your camera spotted something and maybe it didn't, but you still ran the computer vision component, and so the perceived value to the customer is when something is found. Reality is they're getting value when something wasn't found, but it doesn't feel the same, right? So for us, we do it's closer. it's similar to a usage-based pricing model. There's some details in there, but you can think of it as usage-based pricing. But it's usage on on the amount of usage that you would like to have available, and so which is different than what the actual compute is, and it gets into details there. Customers understand usage-based pricing. They just it's not their favorite, so you get a little friction. But yeah, if you have a product or service and you can direct it towards outcomes based, then you've really done a good job of eliminating that friction between your product and your customer.
How have you been trying, what has been some of the messaging, like tips, tricks, hacks that you have found that does work in reducing that friction, if there's anything at all?
So for a long time, we leaned away from anything that looked like token-based pricing. I mean, everybody's seen like you get X amount of tokens for this amount of dollars, and it's really confusing. You have to make your own spreadsheet to try to calculate what your bill would be. So we didn't like that, right? Like anytime a customer has no clue what they're going to be paying, that's a problem. Now, with certain things that we're doing, it's hard to be to get away 100% from that. We use different words, but what we do is we will work with every customer. We basically give them a calculator that they can calculate for themselves, and we'll even offer a little time to talk to us to help make sure they know how to use that calculator. That's been very helpful. Now, what we found is none of our competition is doing that. So they know our price. They don't really know what the competition's price is until they go try it. So it hasn't solved everything, but it does it does give a more positive experience that we have with the customer. And so what we would really, if we really to take that to the next level, we would need to be able to show the customer what their price would be using other products. But that's far easier said than done.
I think Sasha might be having Wi-Fi issues, so I'll jump in too. We haven't really figured out pricing yet, but one of the things that I'm really focused on, or at least the rule that I've given myself, is it has to be outcome based or performance based, right? So this idea of, oh, I'm going to host events, I'm going to start a community, and I have to pay a membership just to be able to do that. That's not going to work. Or saying, if you have a team of 10, then you have to pay for 10 licenses. Like that's also not going to work. But there are things that are coming up completely unexpected. If you host a community, you can send an email to everybody in your community. And so people are telling me, if you add one or two little things, that could actually replace my newsletter system. And I don't need to use Acton or MailChimp or whatever they're using. And that can save me $300 a month. I'm more than happy to pay Eventship for this, right? So things like that are starting to come up where it's really about usage and outcome. And I think, this idea of just build a micro SaaS and charge a monthly fee per seat, that's gone.
Nice. And then Ohad, when you're looking at these go-to-market strategies, these companies are coming to you and you're looking at their decks and how they're going to start generating revenue, what are some of the red flags that you've been seeing kind of time and time again right now?
Right. So that's a great question. And mind you, right, we're focused on seed level, sometimes pre-seed. So in early stage, it's really difficult to assess this question, but there's a few indicators that can help. First and foremost, this concept of domain expertise and unique go-to-market strategy becomes critical. Again, what I said in the beginning, that because the bar to build has lowered, there's a proliferation of companies. You really have to stand out when it comes to entry to the market and your go-to-market approach. If in the past, and again, I'll be the first one to say, I was a first-time founder, my go-to-market slide was, we're going to do ads, we're going to do content, we're going to do outreach. Great. Well, no, that actually doesn't work. You have to be much more strategic on how you work with partners or influencers or have that understanding. And so part of what we're looking at is and maybe the red flag to answer your question, do these what's called true founder market fit? Do they have the right approach to understand their audience and how to reach that audience? And you see a big difference between someone who's been, I'm just going to take real estate as an example, 20 years in real estate, understands all the conferences, knows all the key influencers and key players, to someone who's saying, look, I'm a very smart business person or computer scientist, and I just want to completely disrupt the world of healthcare. And I have not worked in that space or hospitals or whatnot. And it's difficult, right? Because the credibility that you want to gain, the ability to access the customers and the right champions as well, like Raman said, it comes with that expertise as well. So these are things that we look at, and of course, some of that conviction early on. I want to just kind of clarify to all founders here. When we say 0 to 1, it doesn't mean that it's zero. We don't talk to customers. I actually had a conversation with Kevin about this as well. On if you have a great idea, the first thing you probably want to do is go and do some validation and do a lot of discovery, like what Brad mentioned as well, right? So you already have some indication from the market. Is anyone biting? Is anyone excited about this? Is anyone maybe want to be a strategic investor here or potentially a design partner and or a paid pilot? I mean, if you don't have that even at very early stages, that's a red flag to me.
How do you get about the paid pilots? This has been kind of a conversation, I think, throughout the fireside chats, is when you have like your very first MVP sort of product, it may be kind of nitty gritty. How do you start approaching customers for that MVP and for that paid pilot, especially?
Right. And I think, that's part of the validation is you're trying to find the true sort of excitement and them to understand what problem you're solving. Again, if you're unable to get paid pilots, it's a question of like maybe we need to go back to the whiteboard and reposition the product or even focus on different angles of it. Paid pilots are a great way to do the validation of someone is actually interested in what I'm building, understands the problem that I'm solving for their business, and is going to pay for that. And there's different tactics of, well, potentially the first customers, they get a preferred pricing or some grandfather pricing that would be along the way. But eventually, that's really important for that validation, right? Also, one of the things that we discussed going into this webinar is, what are some sort of misconceptions or maybe even some lies about this aspect of paid pilot. So if you talk with a founder and they say, I'm so excited, we have one paid pilot there. Okay, how are the metrics looking? Oh, we're not tracking metrics yet. Okay, so do we know that this paid pilot is actually generating value? Well, we don't know it yet. And so what thing that can happen is at the end of this paid pilot, the customer says, well, it was nice working with you, but I haven't really seen the results. And we decided kind of not to continue on. Again, remind everyone that these companies are all very budget conscious and they're not just spending on pilots. And so it's important to say not only the customer is paying, which is a great indication, we can also measure or get at least some feedback loops there on what's working, what's not working, and kind of understand their statement. Are they continuing this? Are they continuing to a full-time partnership after the pilot?
What are some good ways or some good questions to actually get the good feedback? Because oftentimes it's like, oh yeah, no, this is nice, or it's good. It's that lukewarm feedback. What are some ways to really pull some of the nitty gritty out of it?
I'll let the others kind of chime in here. I have my thoughts.
Well, just a couple thoughts on this one, because this is really, really important. Because when you ask, I mean, especially if they know that you're a founder, if you ask someone, hey, do you like my product? They feel compelled to say yes. They don't want to give you the bad news. And so what you either need to do is go find the jerks in your circle that are not afraid to tell you the bad news, or, just position it differently. Tell them like, look, I want you to be real honest with me. Tell me what's wrong with the product, right? Don't ask what's good about it. Ask what's wrong with it. Then also push on them. You have to be you don't need, I mean, they're doing you a favor, so you could be professional and nice, but be very upfront with them. Would they pay for this product? And then if they say, oh, sure, I'd pay for this product, don't just take that. Go, okay, so when this is live, I can count on you to be one of my first customers. And if they start looking uncomfortable, that's a flag, right? But the willingness to pay is really like that's the metric you care about. Whether or not they think you have the right fonts or colors or anything like that, that's nice. But what you really need to know is would they be willing to pay? And if they're not if they say, well, I'm not actually your customer, so I wouldn't pay for it. But if I were, then I probably would. Then you're actually you're talking to the wrong person. You need to go get that feedback from somebody that would actually be that paying customer and get that yes or no from them. And if you get a no, if you don't get any no's, then you haven't then something's wrong because not everybody's going to buy your product. So yeah, so I would say it's not easy, but focus on finding out what's wrong and really push hard to get that confidence. Would they be willing to pay for the product?
I love that. That's something that I think we're always looking at, with Hubble and is always looking at, how can we get that feedback and that really honest, really good feedback that we can then continuously evolve the product. Because what's that? There's that quote of lukewarm. It's like lukewarm feedback's like the worst feedback, or lukewarm is, the killer of all companies. There's a quote. I will find it and we will put it in the email that will go out, because that is one of the most important things to think about when you are building something that, especially that is in AI. I kind of want to pivot slightly into like the last couple of questions before we go into a Q&A. And this is, what signals a wrapper from a real company that has legs with long-term defensibility? And I want to go with Ohad for this one.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's kind of broadly discussed. Look, one of the pillars that we really kind of discuss is the understanding of data, and it's important discussion to have it. And I know it's, again, sometimes very difficult at an early stage, but you want to try to understand, given that AI as a mechanism, as a system, can be a commodity, what data is used or what different aspects are used to really develop your own unique perspective to perform better, right? Because eventually, if it's compared to any LLM in the market, it's hard to say that this specific solution that you're building as a wrapper would show higher or better results. It has to come with some, usually, data that is fed in that is very, very unique and verticalized, by the way. That's kind of where domain expertise comes in. And so I think the discussions on unique data sources, by the way, data sources that are quite often not public. And that's a big question as well. Why do you have unique data that others don't have? Some of you know the company Placer.ai. They're now, I think, at Series E or so, and they had exclusive contracts to data that others just don't have because of those contracts. There's people that have access to unique data in their industries that they either bought it or they just control it for using some advantages there. So a big question about this would be about data. That's kind of the main thing from my perspective.
I add a quick note to this one too. I think one way to think about it is, if your moat can disappear because the LLM got smarter, it's probably not worth building. Like, it's a wrapper that's going to go away. I'll give you a real example, which is, a lot of people started building marketing compliance tools very, very early on because it was, oh, it's an LLM, but it's also trained on the SEC guidelines, or it's also trained on the healthcare association, whatever, FDA guidelines, like things like that. And so if you didn't build workflows, if you didn't have data, like Ohad said, if you didn't have distribution, community, like anything else on top of just, oh, my LLM is smarter, all of that disappeared, right? Because as soon as all of the LLMs got trained on more information and more data, they wiped you out, right? Like, they don't need you. And you can go to ChatGPT or Claude or any of them today and ask him about some marketing copy, and it will tell you exactly what the regulators will say about it. And so I think having the data, having deep workflow integration, like something else on top of just that's how you can kind of start separating between, is this really just a wrapper, or is there more to it than that, right?
I love that. I want to end with the last question, which is, if you're getting started into an applied AI company today, like after this, you're like, yes, I'm ready, I want to build. How would you design your go-to-market differently now than in 2021? Brad, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Yeah, so this is a really good question. I think it's actually a very timely question, because the go-to-market today, I mean, digital marketing and everything, it does not work the same way it did in 2021. There's so you can't follow that rule book or that playbook and be as successful as you once could. But the nice thing is, you can still very much go experiment with your go-to-market. And so what you can do is, you need to go prove your go-to-market works before you get too far down the path with your company. I mean that in terms of effort and dollars. So find some channels that get you to those customers that you're trying to get to, and make sure you're really getting to them. If you're just like, we had some false signals early on in our company, which was, we had a free trial type of engagement, and we were getting just really impressive numbers of people signing up for free trials. Only turns out the conversion to paid was almost zero. And then it turns out most of them weren't even real people. These were just fake email addresses, and we don't really know what was going on there. But so we had to completely restructure our process. But the whole point here is go find that. If you can't find 10 customers that'd be willing to pay for your product, then you're not ready to yet. Go find at least 10 customers that are willing to pay, that you think that then you can go find the next 50 after that, and use that as your proof point. I would look at it the way I like to think about any go-to-market: treat it like a science experiment. Try to be as objective as possible. When you're the founder, that it takes a little bit of discipline because you're rooting for a result. But what you really want at the end of the day is the truth. So treat it like a science experiment, run a rigid process, and then define your success criteria before you start, and then you won't be led astray, like we were in our early days.
I would chime in here. By the way, the concepts of lean startup apply here as well. This is exactly what Brad referred to now, which I think are critically important. To me, this is a great question because I actually launched and built my company at the end of 2020 and 2021, right? And I would say, I think the main difference on the go-to-market front is that cycle or that time frame between when you start the company, have an idea, potentially even raise money, to showing the metrics has shortened a lot. You really have to start your idea with customers in place in a way. And by the way, I'm saying this, I know some of the founders may not like this. Same as the proliferation of a lot of AI solutions that I discussed. Well, investors are actually looking at the same. They're a little bit concerned because there's a lot of noise in the market. Who's going to be the winner? But there's such a rapid development that we don't even know how things are going to look like in 5 years. And so the best validation can be is that validation from the market. Do you have customers that are paying for your solution? What's the feedback on this? Where does that fit in terms of the competitive landscape? Those are things that are very, very important. I think when I built my first company with my co-founders, is we raised money and we kind of thought, okay, now we'll start to experiment and kind of look at different types of avenues in the market. I don't think that's the approach that would be feasible and valid in 2026.
Raman, I saw you wanted to go, so you can let you have the last word for this part.
Thanks, Sasha. No, I think Brad and Ohad have summed it up quite well. There's two things kind of like going off in my head. I do think this piece around like social media is one, and the second piece is, well, I guess it's part one is I think there's so much you can do before you raise money. There's so much you can do about getting your name out there, about getting those customers that Brad and Ohad have both referred to. I always say maximize that before you go raise money. Second, it's interesting. I'm part of like the social media generation, and I've just seen how many successful founders have come out through the kind of content route, but then also now there's like opinions being floated that social media is now dead. So that's also quite interesting. But I'd also say use like social media, the internet marketing to your full realm. If you live in a big city where there's lots of events, lots of community things happening, go to them and get your voices out. So I'd say I don't think much has changed. I think going back to 2021, people were still doing that. So I don't think much has changed since then. I think social media has become now more crowded. There's a lot more AI bots, so it makes it a lot more harder. So I think I think what I would want to leave it with is before you even look to raising money, just think, what have I done in my realm to get those first 10 customers that Ohad and Brad refer to? So yeah, just amplifying what they've said because I agree with it. I don't think there is, anything more different that I would do.
I love it. I keep like putting myself on mute and then I can't find the unmute button. Thank you guys so much. We want to kind of go into some Q&A. I saw Jones have a really, really good question. So pop your guys' questions in the chat and we'll kind of go through them. I think we'll have time for about 2 to 3. We would love for you guys to get your questions answered. So Jones, you can pop off mute and just give like a 1 minute of like context and then your question.
Yeah, hi. I am Jones. I'm the founder of Byte. We are building an AI that optimizes decision making. Mainly, we use astronomical data to identify the peak performance windows based on the behavioral patterns of the user. So currently in this stage of AI startups and applied AI, where revenue will take a little more time to stabilize because the user need to, first of all, the user need to use our product and uh, be familiar with that for a short time period. And what are the early signals do you look as an investor that the company is investable or not? Mainly the question I think is for Brad.
So happy to chime in, though I think Ohad is the more of the expert on the investor side.
Oh, okay.
But I would say, I mean, from what I've seen others do, and and my first company, we were, we didn't have revenue for a long time because it was just the nature of the business. So you had to, that's just how it went. So they're harder to find, but there are investors that if they believe that you're sufficiently differentiated with a strong enough moat, and they can see that there will be revenue, right? When they believe, you have to take them through that whole story. If they believe that it's going to be something special, then you can get them to invest. But I would say you need that third party validation, someone that's other than you saying this is great and saying that this is going to be amazing, and it needs to be an expert, right? So if you can get that third party validation, the expert that says, yes, this is the next best thing, because that's what I had with my previous company. My previous company, we were inertial sensors, and we had Lawrence Berkeley National Lab saying we were the best thing for industrial applications, to the degree that they were actually willing to get on the phone and talk to customers about that. Now that there's a little bit of luck in getting that to happen, but that really opened up all the doors because now we were credible. We also had, we had a deep bench of patents, and this was a hardware company. So if you're hardware, you need patents. If you're software, it's different. But so you need that. You need a very strong moat, and you need that third party validation.
So for my thanks for the question, Jones, by the way, it's a great one. So I'll try to kind of simplify this into the model that I would look here. Think about a triangle that you kind of find the balance. So the 3 points of the triangle is founders, technology, and then metrics. So depends, there's some founders who are that famous that when they have an idea, they don't even have anything built, no revenue, anything. There's already checks in the door. Why? Because they're celebrity founders and people know them and they have a lot of influence. Then there's technology where maybe the founder isn't known, but the technology here is there's such a mode or such a specific technology, whether it's sophisticated new version of GPUs or a component that are just required, that people are saying, well, that's most likely going to be a big disruptor, right? And they raise a significant fund ahead of time. And then there's metrics. So you have to kind of figure out where you are on this triangle and what you need to optimize for. But I would say, even in your case, just from what I know, from what you described, one, is there a beachhead vertical? Are you specific enough? Because, decision making, it sounds like very, very, very broad. So maybe there's a specific space that you can work because there's, again, nuances and context that is very important. And then integrations that are important for that as well. Are you focused on a beachhead that you can win? And two, you have a vision, right? You don't have to build that vision, as I mentioned in the fact. What's that first version of a product that could be very quickly going to users to show that they're already using it, even if it's pre-revenue? If users are already using this and using it quite often, there's enough data to show that, that's a good indicator. Now, there's no reason why they're using it and you're not already transitioning to revenue, or at least, again, showing the path to that. But I think there's different steps to optimize where you are to show more of that traction.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Is there another question? You can raise your hand or you can pop your question in the chat, and we would love to get to it. Going once. Harold, did what you put in was a question or is that a comment? See, you still here? Oh, I think no, maybe not.
Well, if we assume it was a question, because I think it's a good one, I think Misty's
Oh, comment
answer...
disguised as a question. I got you. Sneaky. Our little Hubble expert being a sneaky. Brad, do you want to take this away?
Yeah, I mean, moats are possible, but or not impossible, but it's different, right? Like what I think Misty said with tech team and traction. spot on. I just would add to that, and speed of execution, because you're seeing teams that can create and evolve product so fast. And if you don't intentionally build a company with that mindset from the beginning that you're going to be fast, then yeah, you'll fall behind. But don't underestimate teams. So this is where, and it doesn't have to be a celebrity team, but get people that are real performers, but in a way that when you're going to raise money, that other people will believe that this is a top performer. What have they done before this company that proves that they are the ones that are going to make the next greatest thing? If there should be something in their resume, and there should be something in your resume, but when you're building that team, if that person isn't better, as good or better than you are, then you're probably not setting your bar high enough. So surround yourself with good people. Yeah. But good people, I would just one more thing on that. It's not just the resume. Do they have the grit and the drive? Because if you don't have that, you will tap out before the end of the journey.
Big facts. Huge. Any last lingering questions? Oh, maybe not. Well, thank you guys so much for spending your Wednesday nights or Wednesday morning, Wednesday night. I don't know where in the world you are, but a Wednesday with us. We hoped that, you took some things away. I'd love for you guys to message us with your biggest takeaways. We love hearing that. So if you haven't already, please connect with all of us. And as a little reminder, that if you want to continue this kind of conversation, you're in luck because you can book with Ohad and Raman on Hubble and really get them, to take a look at either your product, if you want to go into enterprise, if you want to get some ideas and some advice for your pitch, you have access to them. So please, please, please utilize that. We will be sending out a recording tomorrow morning with some notes and some resources. Make sure you stay tuned for that. And with that, we can put some emojis. Can we put some emojis in the chat? We love using emojis here. So I'm gonna do yay. It's not like Google Meets. We can hit it a ton of times. But thank you guys again. This has been really fun. I've learned a lot, and I'm not an AI person, so this has been really, really fun to be able to listen in and to really, build this out. Any last words? I think we're good. This has been really fun. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Ohad. Thank you, Hussein. Thank you, Brad and Raman. And please take a look at Forward. If you are a repeat founder, you can slide into Ohad's DMs and, get his perspective on some things. Shameless plug. And shameless plug to, for all of your founder needs. And with that, I never know how to end these. With that, we will love and leave you. Please enjoy your Wednesday and the rest of your week, and subscribe to the Hubble, what's it called? The Luma calendar to find out all of our events that are coming up. My goodness. For March, we have quite a few events. So let's go. And if you're in London, keep an eye out. We're going to be doing some more in-person events as well. London/UK. So very exciting.
Thank you
with that,
for hosting.
au revoir.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank
you very much.
you.